A federal judge says he needs more time to decide whether or not to accept the Justice Department's request to drop corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Now, Adams was in the courtroom during yesterday's hearing here in Manhattan. The original order said the case impacted the mayor's ability to enforce immigration laws. But critics are calling this a quid pro quo deal between Adams and President Trump. An attorney for the mayor has denied that. Someone else who was inside the courtroom, attorney and CBS News political reporter Katrina Kaufman. She joins me here in Studio 57. Good morning, Katrina. Always great to have you in studio. What jumped out at you in the courtroom, and what was the mayor's demeanor?
The mayor seemed confident when he walked into that courtroom, Errol. One moment that was striking is the judge put him under oath and asked him a series of questions, very notably whether he had been promised anything in exchange for having this case dismissed. Adams said no, not at all. He was also asked if he had been threatened. Something else that was really striking in that courtroom was that Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bovee was the only one sitting at the desk for representing the government. This is especially interesting in light of the series of resignations that have happened during this effort to get the case dismissed. Todd Blanche was also sitting in the row behind him, and at moments it felt like I was back in a Trump trial. There was even a part where Emil Bovee said that Adams shouldn't be sitting to his left in the courtroom. He should be able to be out campaigning, which just, it really was like language that we heard when Trump was in court. And these are his former personal attorneys. It's
really stunning to hear you describe it that way. What arguments then, since the acting attorney general is saying there was no quid pro quo, what arguments did Emil Bovee make?
So he says that there is an appearance of impropriety here, that this is an abuse of the criminal justice process, this prosecution against Eric Adams, and he, as you were mentioning, said that this is interfering with the government's efforts related to national security and immigration enforcement. Bovee also took a pretty strident tone with the judge and said, really, the only issues he should be looking at here are whether there's any harassment or whether this is clearly contrary to the public interest to have this case dismissed.
It's really useful for you to describe the tone of what we're reading from the courtroom, since there are no recordings. Judge Dale Ho is presiding over this relatively young judge. What options does he have now? Because what he decides could set a precedent.
He is a very new judge. It's only his second year on the bench. Something that's notable is that he actually argued in the Supreme Court against the first Trump administration. But in terms of his options here, he can just dismiss this case, as both sides are now asking for. He also raised the idea of perhaps bringing in an outside prosecutor who could argue on behalf of the public. But really, he spent this hearing making a very clear record. He was very methodical, and by the end, Errol, he also just seemed maybe a little overwhelmed. He audibly sighed after all of this questioning had been done and said he didn't want to shoot from the hip and make a decision from the bench on this. He wants to not drag it out, but really look at all of this testimony or arguments that happened yesterday in court before he makes a decision about how he wants to proceed.
And we are out of time, but when might that decision be?
We don't know. I think it would happen soon. The government was really pressing to deal with this as soon as possible. You know, even the judge said he didn't want to drag it out, so could be a matter of days, but he didn't give us an exact timeline.
All right, Katrina Kaufman, we know you'll be all across it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.